Out of all of the legends in the game, Lifeline has seen probably the most substantial changes since Apex was released all the way back in February 2019. And despite seeing so many changes, it never really seems like Respawn figured out what they want to do with her, ultimately putting her in the weird place that we have her in today, where there isn't really any point to play her in the first place. Going back to the preseason, also known as Season 0, Lifeline actually had 2 passives in one, while kind of feeling like that being the standard nowadays was pretty nifty back then. Combat Medic allowed her to revive any teammate while deploying a large, indestructible shield wall in front of Lifeline and the teammate that was being revived. Now, unlike today, the revive was not hands-free, and it did require Lifeline to hold the revive herself to pull it off. But some players actually figured out that you can start and cancel the wall over and over again to juke shots, which added a lot of skill expression to how you could play Lifeline back in the day. Her other passive, because mind you this was one, allowed Lifeline to use any healing or items such as ultimate accelerants 25% faster, making her one of the best legends for pub stomping and generally solo queuing in the game. Mind you that this was during the time where the gold backpack used to speed up heals by 50%, and it's worth noting that if Lifeline did equip both, the 50% buff would override the passive. So despite what a lot of people might say in the comments, these two did not stack. But it gets even better, because in addition to all of this, Lifeline used to be able to revive teammates 25% faster than any other legend in the roster as well, and in conjunction with the shield, this made her more than the ideal first choice to go for a revive. Now, on the other hand, her tactical the dock heal drone was a little bit closer to the heal that we see today, but still, it was a lot more juiced up. On release, the heal drone would heal any player within 1 to 2 meters for 20 seconds, and actively out-healing the first few rings at the time. It could also be pushed around, allowing you to keep it with you, and if you really wanted to troll, you could throw Gibraltar's defensive dome on top of the drone for some mobile cover. But that wasn't the only way that Lifeline's drone was breaking the game. In competitive play, the heal drone was used in tandem with a golden backpack, or just Lifeline's passive, for something called a heal off, where the last remaining few teams would wait out the circle, give all of their heals to Lifeline, and have her use her drone in tandem with other healing items to ensure that she, and thus obviously her team, outlived the zone the longest. And her ultimate was pretty close to the one that we see today, but unlike all of the other abilities, I'd argue it was a lot weaker. While the care package had the same loot system where 1-star drops one certain type of loot, the available loot pool was a lot smaller than the one we have today, and in addition to that, the loot was not a guaranteed upgrade like we see today, but instead it was all the luck of the draw, where a team could receive either blue or purple attachments or gear. On top of that, Lifeline's care package took forever to come down, a whole 14 seconds compared to the 8 seconds it takes today, and to top it all off, it took a whopping 6 minutes to charge up a new one. Funny enough, despite this honestly very overloaded kit, not many players ended up playing Lifeline, and most sweats actually chose to play Wraith instead due to her interesting hitbox and sweaty nature. Lifeline did see some play in pubs, but quite a lot more in the early days of competitive Apex, mostly due to the heal offs that I mentioned earlier. And if you compare the old Lifeline to the Lifeline that we have today, her identity was almost completely different. And other than abusing heal-offs in the very peak of professional play, Lifeline was a pub stomper, a solo legend that was as popular and probably even better than Wraith for destroying the average public game. Lifeline was even used to set a few of the many world records that were happening around the time. And I hate to say it, but as you all know, she did not end up in a good place after all of this. So let's take a look at how that happened. After seeing Lifeline completely change the way Apex was played and enjoyed at the top level, with the introduction of Season 2 and thus a ranked mode, Respawn decided to stop the heal-offs for good, and now the drone would be destroyed after taking 2 ticks of damage from the zone. In addition to that, they added the infamous low profile perk, which made Lifeline take 5% more damage. And these 2 changes on their own were enough to discourage a lot of players from running her, but despite that, her small twig-like hitbox was really tricky to hit, and she still had a lot of strength with her combat revive and fast heals, so the more dedicated players still kept running her. But of course, thanks to Reddit complaining like usual, usual. Respawn noticed this, and to reward the main's persistence, Respawn decided to make Lifeline put on a little bit of weight. This was part of a few hitbox changes, where they also ended up nerfing Wraith and Pathfinder after tons of players had complained that they were too difficult to hit. After this hitbox change, we actually didn't see that many balance changes to Lifeline for a little bit, but we did receive her heirloom, you know, the shock sticks in the Halloween event in Season 3, so that was kinda cool, I guess. But let's fast forward to Season 4, half a year later. In this patch, it seems like Respawn wanted to add a bit more team play utility back to Lifeline after, you know, crippling her in Season 2. So they added something called the blue bins, very much like the support bins that you may know of today. But back then, only Lifeline could open these bins, and the secret compartment would contain a mixture of health items, weapon attachments, and knockdown shields, so, you know, they were a little bit less useful than they are today. But as usual, Respawn did not want to give without taking, so in addition to giving Lifeline a long-awaited buff, they also made all the low-profile legends take more damage, where limb shots that typically deal less damage now dealt as much damage as any other body shot. They just couldn't let us have anything now, could they? In addition to that, while the blue bins were kind of cool, they were kind of hard to find sometimes, but Respawn thankfully decided to do something about that in Season 5. In this patch, the blue supply bin spawn rate was increased by 20%, which definitely was noticeable. In addition to that, they took the knockdown shields out of the blue bin loot pool, you know, freeing it up for more useful items instead. But as we've seen so far, Respawn giveth and Respawn taketh away. With this patch, they also decided to stop the player from being able to move the drone around, meaning that it would just stay in one place after being deployed. They really don't want the Lifeline mains to have a single win, do they? Well, most of the community certainly thought so, and as you've seen so far, for good reason. But in the Season 5 collection event, you know, the one where we received Crypto's map room, mobile respawn beacons, and Mirage's heirloom, we ended up seeing a larger change to Lifeline's kit. It wasn't really a rework, but it was in that ballpark for sure. Lifeline's passive saw a huge change and was actually renamed from Combat Medic to Combat Revive. This new version of her passive would allow Lifeline to deploy the dock drone and revive her teammates completely hands-free, allowing her to defend a teammate or even revive another teammate on her own as the dock deals with the other one. This new shield worked the same way that her previous Combat Medic Revive worked, and it couldn't be shot through. But the hands-free revive could be cancelled by shooting the drone once at any point during the revive animation, including at the very end, right when the drone would stick out from above the shield, allowing you to shoot it down even if Lifeline was reviving with the shield facing towards you. But again, Respawn just can't give without taking away. To pay for this awesome hands-free revive, Lifeline's revives were lowered to 6 seconds, like everyone else on the roster, and in addition to that, she lost a 25% faster healing from her passive, turning Lifeline into more of a revive one trick and becoming less of a solo play clutching, pub stomping legend. But hold on, Respawn weren't done with tuning her towards the team play side of things just yet. Her tactical also saw a small buff to its cooldown, and the ultimate the care package now contained a lot more items. Specifically, it now spawned 3 times more small heals when it decided to spawn small heals, and twice as many attachments when it decided to spawn attachments. These changes were great for the noob Lifelines out there, but it may have been the final nail in the coffin for any pub stompers that were still enjoying her. And for a whole year after this, there were no changes to Lifeline. She was completely neglected. It was almost like Respawn had forgotten about her. During this time, more and cooler legends ended up being released, reworks and other legend changes dropped, and slowly but surely, Lifeline's pick rate kept going down. More and more and more. Even the most diehard mains started giving up on Lifeline, accepting that maybe she's just not meant to be. And then came Season 9. Supposedly realizing that all the skilled players had moved on to other legends by now, Respawn seemingly decided to double down on Lifeline being the heal bot legend that you let your younger brother play when you're forced to let him play with you. The passive once again saw some changes. Lifeline ended up losing the signature shield with the trade-off that she now could revive both of her teammates at the same time, and in addition to that, she could cancel revives that were in progress to allow her teammates to defend themselves with the knockdown shields. Not that they ever were really made aware that it would be cancelled, and honestly, this small feature probably got more people killed than it helped. The heal drone also saw a buff, now healing 8 health a second from the previous 5, and now starting to heal slightly faster before being deployed. Her ultimate saw some slight changes as well, now guaranteeing an upgrade in 3 categories: the body shield, other equipment such as a helmet, backpack, or knockdown shield, and a weapon attachment. And this upgrade would be based on your team's current gear and equipment once the package arrives. making the ultimate a lot less random and quite a lot more reliable. The ultimate cooldown was also cut down from 6 minutes to 5 to allow you to use it at least more than once per game, which was cool, I guess. And oh yeah, I almost forgot, low profile was finally removed, which meant that Lifeline finally would be taking a lot less damage than previously. And despite making Lifeline less of a solo legend and more of a heal bot, it was hard to deny that these changes did make her a lot stronger. And the community agreed. Lifeline saw her highest pick rate in recorded history at 9.1%. But after Season 9, things sadly went sort of downhill from there. Later in the same season, Lifeline put on some weight, receiving yet another hitbox change, making her larger around the legs and the waist, tweaking her fighting capability just a little bit. And after this, we actually entered another drought, with some hopeful mains holding out and hoping that maybe she'll become meta, but with every season being a letdown. It seemed like once again, Respawn had given up on Lifeline, and she even bottomed out at a 4.7% pick rate before something actually would happen. But that something wasn't something good, because with Season 13, we received Newcastle. Newcastle, you know, the guy who has basically the same kit as Lifeline, but on steroids. He can pull off a combat revive with 2 different shields, one being his knockdown and the other one being his tactical shield, and he can even jump to teammates from 70 meters away to help him out and build a big castle around him. His entire kit is what Lifeline could only dream about. And once Newcastle had found his place, Lifeline's pick rate plummeted again, but thankfully it seems like Respawn had something up their sleeve. And that something came with the Season 13 Awakening Collection event. But who am I kidding? Despite there being some changes, and some being better than none, especially with a huge competitor on the rise, these changes weren't really that good and mostly served as some quality of life changes. The combat revive could now be cancelled by the player instead of Lifeline, you know, so they don't just randomly get cancelled and die, which makes a lot more sense. And the Doc Heal drone went from having a static health bolt to being able to heal an infinite amount of health, but still having a 20-second uptime, so I don't know how much of a difference that actually made, along with a longer healing radius. And of course, the care package cooldown was again slashed from 5 minutes to 3.5. In addition to that, in the ultimate, the weapon attachment panel now came with a shield battery, and it no longer showed a large, very visible beacon calling for aid whenever it was deployed, only when it landed. So all in all, some small changes were made, but it was really just some stuff to make Lifeline more playable, like not in making her balanced again just so she isn't horrible to play. But by now the pressure was on. Most players had moved on, and honestly the only reason anyone's still playing her at this point is because she is the first legend you start out with after the tutorial, and many players either keep playing her or I don't know, maybe they just give up after thinking she is too boring to play. Point being, while she does hover at around a 4 to 5% respectable pick rate for the rest of this video, it's safe to say that unlike all the other legends in the game, it is kind of inflated. So remember how I said Lifeline hovers at around 4 to 5% pick rate for the rest of the video? That is because after the Season 13 patch in mid-2022, at the time of making this video, we have only received one more update to her kit, not until Season 16, almost a year later. Respawn really loves these one-year gaps on the updates, don't they? And just like in the previous one, you could argue that these changes were just quality of life, with a faster care package drop from 14 seconds to 8, an increase in its deployment range, and that her passive now doesn't slow you down as much when you revive a teammate. This was also with the addition of the new class system, meaning that all support classes would be able to open the blue bins, not just Lifeline, alongside some new loot and being able to craft teammates' banners back. And while these could be seen as a buff to Lifeline, it removed some uniqueness from her with the blue bins. And if you keep in mind that the way the class system is designed, where when picking a team you really only want one legend from an individual class in a team composition, the other choices for a support legend just make a lot more sense in a team composition. So despite getting an indirect buff with the support class, all the other support class legends are more viable, so once again leaving poor Lifeline behind. And honestly, if you really look back and think about it, that's what's been happening with her since the game came out. And to make matters worse, if we don't count quality of life changes or very small bug fixes, we haven't seen an, at least according to me, substantial Lifeline patch since Season 13, all the way back in mid-2021. And honestly, that's just a shame. I find it so hilarious that Team Fortress 2, that's had a massive content drought for years, received a large update before Lifeline ever did. And I really have to drive this home. Despite all of these changes, she is still not in a decent enough state to play. play, because you have Newcastle available. He can do everything Lifeline does, but way better. I can see that maybe Respawn is trying to make her a noob-friendly legend that's easy to pick up at the start and still have somewhat of an impact, but ultimately, it just doesn't make sense to play her when they've introduced another legend that does everything that Lifeline does, but way better. Seeing Respawn pull a full-on rework to Revenant makes me think that a Lifeline Reborn style rework is on the way. So all we need to do, and I guess all that we can do, is wait. But who knows, going off how little attention Lifeline has received since the game came out, we might not see that rework until, what, 2026? I guess all we can do is wait. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, hit that like button, and maybe subscribe while you're at it. If you want to learn more about Apex's history, make sure to check out the video on the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Peace out.